Hi there, and thank you for clicking on this video. We're going to be going over the Ack Brunt and its Incarnon form. This weapon's been in the game for a bit now. This isn't a new release or anything. Sword and shield, great stance, and it's got some pretty interesting build paths that got opened because of the Incarnons. The evolutions, that is. So let's go over the evolutions real quick. There's no range with this, but there's melee damage, sprint speed, bullet jump. Evolution 2, you get with either option 150 base damage. And the thing that you're basically choosing is the conditional. With over 450 armor, you get 70% heavy attack efficiency. And on the second option, on shield break, basically when your shield gate kicks in and you run out of blue shield, if you will, you get 300% combo count chance while blocking for 11 seconds. I guess allowing you to go a little bit ham. If you're utilizing shield gate or using the mechanic in any way, this can be a pretty solid way of getting off a bunch of heavy attacks really quick. But for the time being, we're going to be running with a frame that has 450 armor, and that basically makes the 70% heavy attack efficiency more or less just a passive, right? That we're always going to have. Okay, the third option, we start to have a little bit more in the way of like options, flavors, if you will. The first one is a general buff, 0.7 range. There's never really a time with, because the follow through is 0.6, so it's middle of the road. But 0.7 range isn't enough to really make the follow through matter too much. So 0.7 range is generally just an overall buff, even running like prime reach. It's just going to give you a small buff, if you will. Abiding hold, the middle one, combo counter pauses when weapon is holstered. If you are somebody that swaps between all of your weapons, this is going to be a playstyle choice. This is going to be similar to the Tenet Livia and the Tenet Grigori, where the combo pausing weapons. This is going to be similar to that, so it's going to allow you to mess around with your primary or your secondary for a bit, and then come back and have a weapon that's already got the combo count, ready to go. So it's going to help in choosing like Naramon or combo duration or combo building mods. Aren't going to be as important with this weapon, and this is actually going to be the one that we're going to choose. The next one is heavy attack windup speed. If you are doing a heavy attack build, this basically means you have heavy attack efficiency and windup going to be on the same weapon. So definitely a candidate for heavy attack modding, because you have efficiency and you have wind up speed already on it. So either this would just basically make it so life strike doesn't really need to be modded. Like just a amalgam organ shatter would be enough to get the wind up to the point that it snaps really well while running like a normal combo counter build. So this is definitely a build path, especially if you have 450 armor, right? Alright, so the final one is where things actually get pretty interesting. Two of the options are kind of depending on your play style. If you're doing a pure heavy attack build where you are not worried about applying statuses with the weapon for whatever reason, then just go increase crit chance by 17%, brings it to 37, it's base crit, like normal, Incarnon bonuses, or evolutions, right? The other one is for more quick attack gameplay. And the third one, this is the first time I've seen something like this. This is like a built-in synth set. So the importance of this mod would actually be more along the lines of freeing up mod slots elsewhere in the build. So say you're not somebody who runs synth deconstruct synth fiber, right? Or just the, what is it, eject magazine, or synth reflex, the Exilus one, the Exilus mod for the frame, that gives you like a mini vigorous swap now since they've changed it. So this would be incredibly useful for a couple of weapons, and we'll talk about this for a bit. Okay, this triggers plated rounds. So if you're using a weapon that has like a monster magazine, there is a mod. I'll look it up later, and once we get into the simulacrum. But there is a mod that gives you magazine size at the expense. It's a corrupted mod where it reduces your reload time in exchange for increasing, or it reduces your reload speed in exchange for giving you a huge amount of magazine. Well, that basically turns that mod into base damage. So on some of the bigger magazine weapons, say like the Soma, for example, where they have the fire rate to support, or to be able to mod into making them a bullet hose to where you can get through the magazine with a high fire rate, and say like the Gorgon also, where you can mod their fire rate to be able to burn through the magazine fast enough. This would allow you to not have to worry about the reload on them, and like the Queller also. So this is sort of food for thought. It's a little bit tricky when you think about it. Like, you really have to be, I would say, used to the playstyle. And because this came out this week, it's not really a second nature thing, because you would have to use the secondary as a damage source also, then get kills with the melee, because as soon as it triggers, this Evo triggers, it starts the timer on the plated rounds. It doesn't wait for you to swap to the weapon, but it would allow you, if you're using the combo counter pause, abiding hold, to, when you need to reload, to just swap to your melee, get a kill, and then immediately swap back to your primary. It would be extremely useful for something like that. Because frankly, plated rounds, you really need to have a monster magazine to be able to like really take advantage of it. And it needs to have the fire rate necessary. Like the Trumna is pretty good, but you really are gonna have issues modding that fire rate to be able to burn through the magazine and keep the base damage up. So it's kind of interesting. Because of the evolutions, we're probably looking at the first melee that could even count as like a utility melee. We don't really have too many of those. Like, we have melees that can, what is it, the Broken Scepter? You press X over the dead body of like a Grenier, you get a health orb. You press X over the dead body of a Corpus, you get a health, or what is it, Grenier, you get health, Corpus, you get energy, or something like that. But it's generally a pretty weak weapon. But the issue with this, admittedly, is that it takes up the other two one of the other evolutions that allow the weapon to actually do damage. So maybe there's some build here that needs to be fleshed out. I haven't found a good combo for this yet. Maybe something like a armor strip build, like what I'm mentally leaning toward. I haven't found something that like I'm super comfortable recommending. But the best that I've found so far was, say, like a Terrify Garuda or like a Terrify Grendel. I could see this absolutely being incredibly useful. I tried the Terrify Garuda, and it wasn't too bad trying to get it to work, because I was trying to utilize her passive for the extra damage. But if you put armor strip on something, you don't have to worry about status procs, really. If you have a Panzer, it gives you the free viral. And if you make this like a heavy attack build on a pure viral setup, you don't have to worry about status procs. And I was hitting for like a couple million, like not an insane amount. But this was allowing me the option of running this. So I could do like a combo counter setup and using relentless combination on Garuda to get the slash procs with a pure viral setup that way. And that worked out really, really well. But this seems like it's going to be an incredibly niche answer, whatever it's going to be. But I like the thinking behind it. Just being able to have like a utility melee to where the entire set is designed to be bounced between. We really don't have anything like that. Play style reinforced. We have some stuff where it's like the tenant weapons where you can bounce between them, but like primary, secondary melee where they're all intended to be used like together. We don't have too much in that category, and I'm glad to see stuff being added to that. So this would act like a synth set for your primary and secondary, and more importantly, when it triggers, it is an immediate reload. So it would be like Garuda's Bloodforge augment. So it's 100%, 0% to 100% completely reloaded. You're not waiting on the synth set. You don't need like a 4 mod set bonus to get it to be really snappy. But it's an interesting idea, and I played around with it, and I haven't really found like a proper answer to it yet, but I found some stuff that worked really well. But maybe if they're going to keep adding stuff into this, maybe we'll get some Incarnons in like a week or two once they finish the rotation, to where this makes a whole lot more sense. But okay, let's go over the Ack Brunt, because frankly, we all need a reminder. Tile Rigor's weapon, 20% crit chance at base, crit multiplier is 2x, status chance is 10. It does have the 150 base damage increase from Evolution 2, so basically cut the numbers in half. But the IPS distribution is 30, 30, 240. You would be looking at half without the evolutions. And if you're doing a quick attack build, a lot of this stuff gets made more simple. The Evolution 2, it's literally whatever you're probably going to end up taking Templar's Wrath in terms of like the one that's the most easy to trigger, because 450 armor is honestly just not that much. If you really want to utilize this, consider throwing on what would it be, like 2 or 3 blue shards, or just modding some armor on. Even if you're running like, and this is only for a heavy attack build, right? Health conversion literally gives you 450 with 1 stack. But obviously it's conditional, and it feels like it's a little buggy on the conditionals. But either way, blue shards do it. Directly modding the armor does it. And Guardian can trigger it, but it, testing in the middle of a mission, it's kind of hard to tell 70% heavy attack efficiency because I was using Relentless Combination, and the stacks just build up so fast, right? Like, so it is what it is. The next one for quick attack, range. If you're doing a quick attack build, if you're somebody who swaps naturally, the combo counter pause is just super nice. So when it's time, if you're priming, it's not necessarily quick back and forth like you're trying to do a melee carry, and you're trying to self-prime. The second one can literally just be so you can go ham when you get the option to. So it's really nice to be able to, spend some time in your primary, your secondary, and when you need to, just swap to your melee, and it's just good to go. And you're not caught in one of those situations where, like, even with Naramon, if you find yourself like your finger hurting from meleeing so much, you can swap back and forth in a lot more ease, if you will, and be able to use your melee at its max strength. Even though, to be honest, combo count is pretty easy to get nowadays, but especially with the groups and the enemy density. But it can be still a pain in the ass if, like, you're sort of caught between groups, or maybe it's a mission node where the enemy density isn't super high, like a survival, and like an acolyte jumps on you. That's probably the biggest issue nowadays, is where an acolyte, if you're running with a group of other people and it's like a spy node, there's not really a ton of enemies, and an acolyte jumps on you, and all of your bonuses, like all of your modding, your frame buffs, and everything are toward melee. It can kind of suck for a couple seconds, especially if you're using something like this, where it doesn't the weapon just doesn't have a ton of multi hit. It's not like a Tonfa, right? Tonfa, you can build combo almost instantly, like 220 hits on a group of like 4 or 5 enemies. Sovereign Outcasts, block forward combo. You got more than 5 enemies there, you're basically getting your entire combo counter up with one throw. That's not the case with this weapon. So it's something to consider, because the only thing you're basically going to be not picking is 0.7 range. And heavy attacks are pretty clear. Get 450 armor, even if it's like 2 blue shards, 450 armor, pick the heavy attack wind-up speed, because it literally saves you mod slots. There's no reason to not have 450 armor if you want to use this weapon specifically for a heavy attack build. Just make sure you got the 450 armor. It's even worth the mod slot, I would say. And go with the heavy attack wind-up speed also, because then you won't have to run life strike. You can you won't have to mess around with like the life strike, amalgam organ shatter, so you have like that small decrease in crit damage. You can go with the regular one or run amalgam anyway, and it would free up like a faction mod, which would be a big damage increase. So you have some options, but obviously if you're going heavy attack with this for whatever reason, you would pick this, you would do the 450 armor, and make sure you get it. Grendel is a great candidate for this, by the way, because he gets Nourish, you can do Armor Shred, you get Viral, so it's an overall win for him. I would say this is a great candidate weapon to run as a heavy attack build with Grendel. So food for thought. But if you're running melee the entire time, or you just want to mess around with it and just pick it up and go, there's nothing wrong with 0.7 range. But if you are going to be running this regularly and you just want the easy use, the Abiding Hold is the way to go. And for heavy attack, if you're armor stripping regularly, like say like a Terrify build, Absolute Valor is the way to go. If you're even thinking of potentially applying status effects, then Versatile Creed. If you want to mess around with a potential like synergy, then Rogue Readiness is the way to go. But the default, I would say, is easily Versatile Creed. Okay. All right, so let's go to the Simulacrum. That took a little bit longer than expected, because we need to talk about the evolution, the actual Incarnon. This one does get a sort of a meme. It's a decent one. Once it was posted, I didn't get these exact numbers when I was testing, but I agree basically with what they said. Like, obviously we wasn't off on the base damage or anything like that. So let's talk about the evolution, and it's going to be broadly speaking about math. Okay. So this is the Ack Brunt Incarnon Genesis. It lists out the actual damage numbers, and the part that we need to talk about is this weapon has a throwable. And let's get some combo. We just need to get to 6x. In the spirit of Incarnon, the Incarnon weapons, I have Toxin modded onto the frame, or onto the weapon itself, not the frame. But the projectile, if you can see, we're proccing Toxin and gas. The projectile is pure heat. Okay. So I was trying to do some math, test some builds. to see how high you could get it. But let's go over some quick math. There's technically, mentally, you need to think about the projectiles as two separate ones. Okay? You have the one when you're hovering where you do like the vertical throw, and then you have the slide. I agree with these numbers. I got these. The aerial where you're hovering or you're in the middle of the air and you do the throw is more damage. It's double, 298. The slide is 149. I got numbers similar to this. It's not worth really mentioning, but the projectile is two things. You have the actual projectile, and then you have the impact AoE. And I mean that literally. It is a forced impact, no IPS, heat only AoE. Okay? If you think about the other Incarnon weapons, that's kind of what we've been getting recently, where the AoE is like pure heat. And that is the case today. Okay? So you have the projectile itself, and then you have the AoE, are two separate instances of damage. The projectile has IPS, and it does respect condition overload. It feels like there's a ratio there, so it doesn't feel like it's 100%. But it does get affected by like it even lists some of them, like holster amp, Arachne, Vex armor, vigorous swap. I got to these. I didn't test amp though, but it is listed. The one I did want to test was Eclipse, because of great memes thinking about Exodia Contagion. But there is a projectile. It's IPS. The IPS jumps up or the damage jumps with the hovering. The ground slide is half damage, 149. The one when you're hovering is 298. Or you can think about the aerial being twice the damage, whichever one works. So 10% impact, 20% impact, 10% puncture, 70% slash, so that's pretty good. It means you don't have to worry about adjusting slash if you want to use this. And the AoE deals double the damage of what the projectile does in terms of raw numbers. Doesn't appear to be affected by condition overload, but it is pure heat. It has a forced impact proc. And here's where my numbers started to get a little bit different. It's not too big of a deal, but it has a 50% fall off. I got numbers similar to that. I was getting like 60%. It's whatever though. But the projectile has 14% base crit chance and 34% base status chance. And even they have approximate on here because it was giving me some issues. This does respect the evolution bonuses though. So if you're trying to hit reds with this for whatever meme build you're trying to do, you want to try to, you can run Weeping, and you will be able to guarantee at least a heat status. The impact does not dilute your element procs. It is a forced impact proc. So Weeping on its own will basically guarantee you almost 2 procs for every projectile. Every time the projectile hits, it's going to give you 2 procs. So if you want to run this as a primer, and this honestly is what I'm going to recommend, if you do want to run this as a potential primer, so you would use this for like say a heat, or if you want to do like a really, really weak viral, with like a heavy slash weighting. So like normally I wouldn't recommend self-priming with this. But one of the things you could do, because the AoE is pure element, there's no IPS on it. And remember, it's just the forced impact. So one of the things you could actually do with this is slide into an enemy with viral, where you actually have elemental viral modded onto the weapon, but have it be like ultra weak. As soon as you get like, you would just need like 50% for it to be fast enough to where you can proc enough viral for it to be relevant and still keep your main hit slash weighted. It's going to be less slash, and you'll be priming, or you'll still be hitting viral as a status proc occasionally, but it would allow you to throw the projectile and know you're going to hit heat or viral on the enemy. I mean, you're probably going to proc one of each if you do like a 50% weighting, or even like a 30%. You'll probably get 2 heat and a viral with like a 30% weighting, is like what the dead money is basically saying, right? So you could actually self-prime with this Incarnon if you want to play that play style. Crit multiplier is 2. I was getting rounding errors on this, but I basically got 2 also. I was getting like 1.9 to like 2.1. But the issue is that none of this stuff is listed. You kind of have to figure it out. But the projectile is pure element. There's no IPS on it. It has a forced impact. And honestly, in terms of utility, I really like it. The projectile itself, not the AoE, you can do some pretty insane damage with it, especially on armor strip targets. What was it? Arthas was getting like 1 million tick slash procs out of it. And I was using it with a Nourish Garuda on armor stripped enemies, trying to get like similar numbers, right? So you can get some pretty nutty damage out of this. So it is what it is. Like, it's a projectile. It's just sort of like, as far as I can tell, is just something that needs to kind of just be in the background. But there should be some pretty good memes being brewed with this, because you can, especially the projectile, you can get some pretty damn good numbers on that. So anyway, let's go over the builds. They're going to be pretty basic. This was mostly talking about the evolutions. Honestly, my go-to recommendation is just going to be the regular slash build. I know we just talked about that for as long as we did. But it feels really good. And with a faction mod, I can't recommend more running Arcane Strike. But if you do not have Arcane Strike, I would say do Organ Shatter and Gladiator Vice on the hybrid setup, just to be able to get the attack speed up and do double attack speed on it. It's just, the weapon is incredibly slow. I mean, it is what it is. It's a sword and shield, right? And the one thing, and the reason why I'm honestly going to recommend the quick attack build is honestly because of the stance. When we do generally like a heavy attack build, it's because we're trying to take advantage of a forced proc, if you will, on the heavy attack on the stance or something similar. We do not have that luxury with the sword and shield stances. I think it's just a knockdown. Or is it a ragdoll? It's one of the two. It's not a force slash, and that's the important thing. So I would recommend the quick attack build like so much more over the heavy attack build. That being said, there is a way, you know, obviously, here's the build for this if you want a little bit more crit damage, and you got Arcane Strike. We were using Strike before, or just now, so pretty basic. Go with Gladiator Might and what I just did. If you don't have Strike, use Vice or even Quickening. Ideally, I would say do Berserker Fury, Gladiator Vice. Alright, let's do the heavy attack. The heavy attack is kind of whatever you can get out of it. If you want to be able to spam heavy attacks, there's 2 real ways to build it. And honestly, I would recommend as much raw damage as possible. And to go a full strip viral setup. Gonna have some polarity issues here. Actually, we can just do this. Mission overload. What am I missing? Crit damage, and probably a flex slot. Obviously going to have issues with the big Fever Strike and Sacrificial Steel. So try to use something like this. You can also, if you're not running like a Garuda, with Garuda, obviously run Relentless combination so you can spam those heavies, right? There is, on the stance itself, Finer Harbinger, which is actually what I'm going to recommend to you. Just because it's like, it feels like it has better multipliers. More importantly, I like the stance movement itself. So obviously a personal opinion. It just feels way more dynamic to me. So in terms of like just being fun, this is probably one of my favorite stances. So a big viral on a full strip build will allow you to spam your heavy as much as you want, and you would be looking at like a quickening to get your combo back as fast as possible. Actually, we do need range on here. And yeah, your quickening would go like right here. Like right here is where quickening would go. So you can keep your attack speed up. You have your heavy attack wind up. And it would just be kind of whatever you need it to be. But this weapon can still do pretty insane damage with a pure base damage, modded base damage, just pure crit, add some extra faction, like a faction multiplier on top of it. You can do some pretty nutty damage with this, especially if you're full stripping. I know that's not really a hot take, but the weapon really does pop off pretty well, especially if you're willing to auto every now and then. You can get your combo back up super fast, because the heavy attack efficiency innately is 70%. So you're not really having to build your combo that much, especially if you can get it toward 90%. Maybe a Riven would come into play, just so you can sort of get it for free. Because right now, in terms of heavy attack efficiency, unless you're doing corrosive, what was it? Efficiency. So in terms of heavy attack efficiency, we really only have two options, and the issue is modding, right? Reflex Coil gives you 60%, Focus Energy gives you electricity, and maybe if you have a Riven that can take care of one of these elements, it'll give you like a Toxin, right? You can go Viral Electric. That wouldn't be bad also. And then that'll free up this slot, but you'd need to come up with attack speed somewhere else, so like an Arcane Strike could do it. Because you don't need a ton, right? So it's just kind of, you have to do the best you can with it, because it's not really going to be a slash weapon. You're not taking advantage of a force slash proc. So the cheese build with, say, like a Reaper Prime or like a Hate, you don't really have access to. So most of the time, if you don't want to deal with the heavy attack efficiency, that means Blood Rush has to go away. I know, that's kind of shitty. And the weapon does do decent damage with like a standard heavy attack build. So you would go like Corrupt Charge. It still does decent damage, but you would have to go with the crit chance. The crit chance only evolution. And you would have to sort of like prime the targets in another way. So it would either be Killing Blow goes to Condition Overload, which is what I would recommend, and just try to make it work. And just keep the 2x. And you should be able to do decent numbers. It'll at least guarantee you a crit and some oranges. But the fact is that you want to see the reds. You want to get those additional tiers. If you can fit Blood Rush and Sacrificial Steel together to hit like that second tier red, it's a lot of damage on the table, especially with a faction. So I could see a Riven fixing this weapon, but it's gonna perform best on enemies that are stripped. is where it's going to be, and that's because there's no force proc on the heavy attack, and that's part of the issue. Is you kind of have to cope into the build a little bit. But a viral build, especially if you're priming, you can do some nasty numbers with this. So it's going to be up to you to figure out how to like properly mod into what you're doing, because you can't you can't you can't cheese the build on like a slash proc. You have to go viral or like a massive corrosive, especially at lower steel path, because obviously you're not going to be doing this in regular star chart. But I could see a viral build scaling incredibly well. So it's going to take some work. It's not really a solid build. It's going to require a proper primer. You're going to need viral on the primer to guarantee the 10 viral stacks to get the most out of this. You're going to need to be able to do like a faction mod, and potentially the build I was using is you would do one of the Amar set. You would do the Amar set, like do like just in like the Exilus slot on the frame, where it gives you the speed and it gives you the bullet jump, right? And if you're doing like a Demolist, because that's what you're going to try to use this on, you would use that, the heavy attack from that, to get in and one-shot the Demolist. And I didn't get too far into Steel Path. I only got like round 10 before I had to stop. And that was because of like time constraint, not because like the weapon didn't do damage. Like it was still killing in one shot. But that's what you would have to do, and that way it would free up primed reach, and it would give you access to the faction slot also, or the faction mod also, and that would make this perform way better. So it's obviously going to be about as good as it's going to be. You're going to have to go raw damage. You have to go raw damage in order to get this to really pop. But I'm having polarity issues, so like actually showing the build. So it's going to be what it's going to be, because you can't take advantage of like a status. So even the aura mod for the double dip, empowered blades, it's not going to help you because you're not taking advantage of a dot. So it kind of is what it's going to be. Raw damage, viral, on a heavy attack is kind of your bread and butter. That's going to scale the best. If you're going against Corpus, you're going to kind of be stuck with a viral build also, and then you would need like a defense strip. So like Helminth on like Theros Strike would be a very solid option. Full strip, shields, armor gun. They're weak to viral, then hit them with viral again. So your option's going to be viral most likely. So it is what it is. So pretty standard builds, but it's just there's no dot to take advantage of. So that's how you would sort of cope around it. But it is what it is. Anyway, we've talked long enough. It's 38 minutes. Take it easy, guys. Have a blessed day.